Patchwork Heart Ministry and Fiat Ministry Network present the Discover Your Mission series.
When I was young, in the 1950s, I attended Catholic grammar school and I memorized the Baltimore Catechism. In fact, I think I got an A on all of my tests. I faithfully attended Mass each week, not because I wanted to, but because I was afraid if I didn't, I would suffer eternal damnation. I followed all the rules. I followed my Catholic faith faithfully. But it wasn't until I became a wife and a mother and I began to try and pass my faith on to my children that I realized that everything I knew about Jesus was memorized doctrine.
I can't even share with you how I was so rooted in my faith. And I was attending Mass, but I was not present. I was a good man, I was a good father, I was instilling the sacraments into my family. I was definitely not intentional. I was stuck rooted in my faith.
But what kind of strength did he have? Jackie did not just have a strength of body or baseball skill. He had a strength inside of his spirit, a courageous meekness that empowered him to play the game.
And I tell him what is going on with me, and he's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, no, I think this is like some sort of miracle, dude. And he's like, okay, of course, but I'll believe it when I see it. Honey, you've been trying to quit, and you've been saying this and saying that. And his big line to me is, you shouldn't say things because I never follow through on them. And so this was week after week, month after month. He is looking at me like, this is a miracle. There is no way that you, on your own, could have done this.
In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 16 through 21, St. Paul compares the sacrifice of the Christians to the sacrifice of Israel and then to the sacrifice of the pagans. Paul calls the chalice the blood of Christ, and the bread as participation in the body of Christ, and then warns his listeners that you cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons at the same time. So in other words, you need to decide, what are you going to participate in? Are you going to participate in the historic Christian idea of the altar of sacrifice, which is in the Eucharist, or not?
Welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. This is a show all about implanting hope in our hearts. I'm Bill Snyder, joined by my friend Ann DeSantis. We're glad you're here for our uplifting conversation about faith and how it sustains our hearts through all the seasons of life. Thanks for walking with us. And good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. I am Bill Snyder. It's great to be with you this evening. It's hard to believe I'm saying we are in December here, but it's great to be back and be live with you once again. We hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving and enjoyed our programs with Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers and Sarah Christmeyer. If you haven't listened to them, go on back into our podcast feed and take a listen. But it is great to be with you and be with you live once again here on the Sowing Hope podcast. As always, I'm joined by my friend Ann DeSantis. How are you, Ann?
Oh, awesome, Bill. Good to have you back.
Yeah, it's nice to be
from
back.
Your vacation.
Yeah, it's nice to be back in the United States, although I gained a little bit of weight over Thanksgiving, as I'm sure many Americans did. But anyway, I know we have a wonderful guest, so why don't we cut right to the chase and tell us about him tonight?
Yes, I'm very thrilled that we have with us Jensen, coming to us from Vancouver, Canada. And he is with Glass Canvas. It's an agency focused on unlocking ministry potential, and they specialize in strategy, marketing, and digital experiences. Jason, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a real joy to be on here with you guys.
Yeah, we have so much to talk about because I know you are doing amazing work. And I was looking through your website and thinking, my goodness, this is awesome, because I actually am the director for a nonprofit myself, and I'm looking at all the great things that you do to help uh, Catholic organizations. So please do. Let's start out with your faith journey. I know that right before we started, you and I were just talking before we got, actually started with the podcast, and you were telling me that you would be so happy to share that faith journey with everyone.
Yeah, it's always a privilege to be able to share my story with others, and um, it sort of has different phases as God has broken into my life, and I grew up Catholic, but and I would say as a young kid, I kind of really had a connection with God, but then through a series of events, kind of in my teen years, I think this is a typical story, just uh, followed sort of the culture around me, and I was born and raised in South Africa, and we immigrated to Canada right around when I was turning 16, and just that displacement or everything just turned my life into a turmoil, and really was like trying to cling on to something that was meaningful, and my faith, just there was no appealing version of Catholicism that surrounded me at the time. Like I didn't have that. And fast forward to my parents moved from one side of Vancouver to another side, and there was this evangelical university there, and they said, "Hey," they kind of having a sense for where I was at, said, "Hey, we'll pay for your first year if you go here, but if you go anywhere else, you're on your own." And I was like, "Oh, okay," And I told my mom, I said just before the first day of classes, I said, I don't want to go to a school full of a bunch of Bible thumpers. And those are like famous last words. A guy named Denver Harris, he probably isn't listening to the podcast, an evangelical guy, and he just was able to share the faith in a really relevant way. And the charisma kind of just hit me for the first time. And so I was in sort of a 6-month period exploring the evangelical world of faith, and end up going, I was saved by an altar call, of all things. And just put my hand up and I said, I want more God, and felt the Lord kind of enter my life for the first time, in my adult life in a really meaningful way. But there was still some part of Catholicism, and I'm so grateful for this, that I was like, oh, I wasn't ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I never in the time I was trying to search for God felt anger or whatever to the church. And I feel like that was a real grace. So I went back and talking to the parish priest at the time, who's now a bishop. And I was like, okay, what's with Mary and the saints and all that kind of stuff? And he had just these really satisfying intellectual answers that kind of calmed my heart and steadied my heart. And that was the initial phase. And then you had all the sort of the the baby fruit. You got the freebies of your early conversion, and grace just comes a lot easier and stuff like that. So that was really great. And then the other part that I really want to share with you is like the season that I've been coming into the last few years is I heard a guy who has now become a really close friend and mentor. His name's Jake Kim. His wife Heather Kim is on the podcast Abiding Together, and so they're local. They live really close to where I live, and I started going out for coffee with him later on. But the first time I heard him talking about God as Father, and I was like, wait, God as Father, like, I get the Our Father, and the language is familiar, but the idea of God actually being my dad, it was blowing my mind as in a really unique way. It spoke to me. How sometimes the gospel just breaks through, and then all of a sudden you can catch that idea. And so I was just watching it online, which is ironic now in a pandemic with all that's going on, but it really affected me. And I just decided, hey, I'm going to try this out as if it's real, as if it was almost like an experiment where I said, I think I'm going to go for it until it doesn't work anymore, to live as if God is my real dad, like bring him into meetings, take him wherever I go, like kind of as if a dad would be walking with me and guiding me and helping me live life in a better way. And slowly, he started to rewrite who he was in my life, and these ideas that I had about who God was. And um, it was really through people that he was giving me, saying, "Hey, I'm like this. I'm like this. I'm like this." And one story of those, if I can keep sharing, I'm on.
Please.
Yeah. So one story, I'm escaping in. I'm really finding like these sacred parts of my heart when I go fishing, and it was a new experience for me. And I was pretty terrible at fishing. We're out here in British Columbia. There are we have a really great salmon run, but I couldn't catch anything. And I'm frustrated, and the Lord provided this fishing version of himself for me. And his name's Austin. And he kind of initiated me into fishing, and it's hard to describe, but it was like a spiritual experience having him father me through that. And a few years into it, I'd been really, I'd really grown, and I'd caught two salmon, and they're sitting on the bank of the river behind me. And, I got a big family. We had 4 kids at the time. We have 5 now. And all of a sudden, I say, "Hey, should I gut these fish right away? Or like, is it okay if I do it at home?" The real best. And he's like, you probably should do it now. It's better, makes for better eating and makes for better cleanup and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, but the fishing is so good. And so I just kept on fishing. And then I turned around, and a couple minutes later, and I see that Austin, in such a kind way, is gutting my fish for me.
Mhm.
There's like these 2 parts within me that are saying, "Oh, I should be, as a man, I should be cleaning those fish myself." And then the other part of me feels the Father's voice just say, "Let me love you in this way." And that was one of many very healing experiences of God rewriting who he was in my heart. And yeah, it's been amazing journey ever since to discover that we have a dad who loves us unconditionally. And yeah, that's a little taste of my story.
Awesome stuff. I really love how you talked, especially in the beginning there, about somebody hitting you hard with the kerygma. Not everybody understands or maybe knows exactly what that is, but it's basically the central theme of Christ. The passion, death, resurrection of Jesus, and what he did, and that's such an important part of our Catholicism. But it's not often preached. It came to you through an evangelical way, through an evangelical brother, and that's amazing. Because I think as Catholics we have to do so much more of that. Talk about exactly who Jesus is and what he came to do. He came for one purpose, and I think that's such a beautiful part of your story. And then really to expand on that and say that God is your Father, and that to bring him into the daily activity and life, and to recognize, his fatherly role in everything, from meetings to fishing. Wow, what a powerful witness. And it's one that challenges me, and I think challenges a lot of people listening right now to really say, and invite God in a powerful way as your Father to uplift you. So thank you so much for your witness. That's just totally beautiful, Jason.
Yeah, thank you.
I thank you too. I love the image, and we all need to know that God is our Father, and that story tells that in such a good way in your personal journey. And we always appreciate on Sowing Hope when people tell those personal journeys, because that's where it all begins. No matter what your ministry is, it begins with, how did you get to the point where you wanted to go into ministry? So what happened after that? I mean, in your life, because obviously there was another point that came that God spoke to you about getting involved in ministry. We'd love to hear.
Yeah. So I graduated university and then got into a business, and in classic young man fashion, was full of, self-confidence and all those things. And then the 2008 recession happened and lost it all, went through, quite a bit of turmoil. And I discovered at that point that I had so much of my identity wrapped in success. And when that was taken away, I really had to rediscover who I was as a person and where I was putting my identity in. And uh, it's funny to say, we actually yesterday, or on the 1st, we celebrated 9 years of Glass Canvas. So this is almost a decade ago. And in looking for new jobs, I interviewed at a couple spots, and it just in a weird way, those interviews never progressed further. I didn't get a no, but I didn't get a yes. And so I said, what every other entrepreneur does after, epic failure, is I started another business. And that first Easter, I remember debating with the Lord, because the models at the time for agencies or sort of people in the marketing world were you do 80% for-profit clients and then 20% nonprofit clients. That's how you could do the work for the church. But what I was seeing at the time was that that model wasn't working, because you'd have this really great agency or group come do this really great work, but then Sony or Nike or whoever else came and did that work, they were the ones who were really paying the bills. So that's like, oh, we're sorry, ministry, church, whatever it is, we got to take care of our real clients now. And I was that Easter, I was really wrestling with the Lord, and I was saying, I really want 100% ministry agency. And it's funny, because I was actually negotiating with God that be okay, because all the advice around me was saying that's a terrible business model, to focus your financial future on just serving the church, or nonprofits or things like that. But I just felt really strongly, I think this was a gift. And that Easter vigil, I was there praying, and I heard this really kind line, the Father saying, just do it until you can't pay the bills. And that gave me permission to try. And that's all I needed, was to be able to try. And God has been so faithful to us throughout the years. So we've only taken on churches, charities, and nonprofits in the faith space. So we have worked with some evangelical clients and some pro-life clients who are a little bit veiled in that their whole board is Christian or Catholic and or evangelical, and they are, but they really all have they're all building the kingdom in one way, shape, or form. So that's kind of how that progressed into that. And then I just had this. You guys have probably had this before. There was this part in the world that I just knew had to be filled. I was the church wasn't telling, and hasn't been able to tell its story for herself, in that we see in culture, much of the culture is telling the church's story for her. And that just really compelled me to say, oh, the gospel deserves a more competitive message in our culture. Not that it needs to be changed or anything along those lines. It just needs to be presented in a way that can resonate, in the world that we live in. And that kind of started the journey of Glass Canvas. And I pitched that idea to a friend, and he said yes. And then quickly two other friends joined us within a year, and we've been able to grow over the last 9 years until there's 19 of us now, and we're having the time of our lives.
Oh, I love that story.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's still being told, isn't it? Every single day that you do your work, and it's kind of perfect timing, I'm thinking, with this pandemic, because everything is really online anymore, and I'm sure that your business, because you help people with that aspect, what has that been like for you?
Yeah, it's a lot of our clients, right when the pandemic hit, there was this real interesting, it's, go or no go. I think the whole world kind of felt that. And at the same time, we've been trying to launch this Tilma product that I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit. And what ended up happening was uh, we'd been able to save up some money and as a business, and then we felt like God was starting to ask us this deep question. So we'd entered the OSV Innovation Challenge and worked with the Notre Dame Idea Center, and this idea of uh, going from an agency to being a product company just kept coming back for us in saying we've developed technology over the last 5 years, and the beautiful thing about just picking nonprofits is that we've always had the mentality of, hey, if we build this for you, uh, are you okay if the next client gets to use it? Uh, because if you're in a different agency that's building technology, say you focus on banks, one bank doesn't want you to use the competitive advantage for the next bank that you work with. So you basically start from scratch over and over and over again. But we were able to save our clients money, but also keep developing our technology over the last 5 years. And that led to the point with the pandemic that, well, the other thing I should mention is our clients actually like that because the work that they get to invest in gets to bless the kingdom in another spot. And so over the last 5 years, we've developed technology, and it kind of got to a point where God had orchestrated all these things where ministries were not in the best place to say, hey, this is what we can commit to in a year. And at the same time, this door of bringing Tilma to life as a real product in and of itself was becoming true. And we prayed as a team, and we made the shift during the pandemic of saying, hey, the church needs us now more than ever, because all of communication has gone online in many ways, streaming mass and communicating to the gospel. And we see different spots that got caught in tough spots because they didn't have that digital infrastructure, and we just wanted to jump in and really serve the church in that way. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Wow, that's really incredible. And just taking a look at the Tilma product, I would love it if you would share with us a little bit more about that, because it looks so neat as a platform. So if you talk with us a little bit about that, we have, of course, always have a lot of nonprofits and people in ministry listening to the podcast. So that'd be so cool for us, just to be able to share with our listeners about that, if you would.
Yeah. So at the heart of what we're trying to do with Tilma is almost the heart of what we would always been done is this idea of unlock ministry potential. That's what us as Glass Canvas, that's just the thing that we always constantly want to be doing, is saying, oh, what part of the kingdom are you called and anointed to build? And how do we give you the tools and infrastructure and whatever you need to do that really well? And so Tilma is, we became obsessed with this idea of how do we democratize amazing ministry experiences and give that into the hands of a diocese. And I believe that there's this pastor, I believe his name is Bill Hybels. He coined this phrase. He said, "The local church is the hope for the world," and I believe that is absolutely true. And if you think about the power of every diocese to move the needle in a city, it's just unbelievable. And so Tilma is it's a holistic ministry system that has tools. It has a ministry philosophy baked into it that can help dioceses get people on personalized ministry journeys. So a story is probably helpful to outline what that means.
Yeah.
So imagine you have this couple who's sacramentalized but not evangelized. They are coming to get married in the church, but their faith sort of means something to them getting married in the church, but that they, it's important maybe because of grandma. And so they end up coming to the pastor. It's usually a clunky system because it's difficult to all work together if the diocese is managing marriage prep or if that's done at the parish level. And just coordinating all those pieces feels messy. But with Tilma, they would come and they would register on their parish website, which would then give the diocese leader and the parish leader the key information that they need. So we have their email, we have their name, we have their wedding date. And at that point, we can say, how do we give them a vision for Catholic marriage that they might not get? Because if they start marriage prep with that, they're far more likely to understand and to be enriched by even a marriage prep program. And we know that there's a lot of great ones out there. And then they continue going on. So if we serve them content or experiences before marriage prep, then they go through marriage prep in a better way. And then from marriage prep to their actual wedding day, if we, have encouraging messages or whatever, that's also great. And imagine we could help a bishop write a really thoughtful thing on their wedding day. And then it says, we're really excited that you've chosen to be married, the sacrament of marriage, and that your love, we're encouraged by young people who are willing to love each other and, commit to the sacrament. That's my real-time copy of what a bishop would say in an email. But but imagine it's just this really encouraging thing, because Gap sends me an email on my birthday saying happy birthday. But when's the last time the church sent you something on your birthday? Or just on a special occasion, your anniversary or whatever it might be. And I think the heart of the church is that they want to do that. I meet so many amazing people in the church, and this is about giving them the tools to love really well. Because they have the heart for it, and we're just giving them tools that they can do that better. But that's not where it should end. 6 months into their wedding, it should flag somebody at a diocesan or a parish level to say, hey, you know what, the best time to build a strong foundation with your marriage is within the first year. Come to our newlywed workshop, which is probably a ministry that's available already in the diocese. I'm just now able to connect that opportunity to that couple.
Yeah.
So, and then to kind of full circle it, there's another part of Tilma called Proclaim, which is about taking disciples and helping them become missionaries, through training and expertise. And now, if I can find a missionary trained couple that can mentor this couple who has had a positive experience with the church so far, then all of a sudden their connection that they have together can lead that couple on a potential faith encounter where they have a real shot at deepening their faith or experiencing God, because we're matching disciples with potential disciples. Because we deep down, we know that people evangelize people. It's not that technology does not evangelize people. And our job as technologists and communicators and people willing to serve the church is helping her connect people, disciples to people who need to encounter Christ through them and hear the gospel. So hopefully that explained a little bit. I know we got a little bit of time, so I can kind of go a little bit more in depth with you guys.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah, I agree. I love it. I love the personal touch there. As you said, you get the happy birthday from Gap, but when's the last time we got it from our church or our diocese? So what you're doing also is very educational for others to be able to use the gifts of technology to be personal and to create disciples. So I just commend you on that. So how long has the Tilma project, how long has that been around, and what is the future for it?
Yeah. So again, in the Lord's leading, we worked with a guy named Edmundo Reyes, who he is in the Archdiocese of Detroit, and he launched Unleash the Gospel, which is this diocesan-wide brand that is also on the same, maintenance to mission. And so us getting involved there and helping refine some of his strategy and working with him to develop some strategy, build a brand and things like that. That's when we first got a taste of, oh, this is amazing. And seeing the power of a diocese at that level. And then being from Vancouver here, we have a relationship with some of the leaders here. And we said, hey, this is what we've just done in Detroit. And Edmundo is amazing. And he was able to, and you can still go take a look at unleashthegospel.org and just see the vision kind of played out there and my hat goes off to him. We talk all the time. He's one of the best communicators in the church, and so I'm really hats off to him. And then we started doing it here in Vancouver, and saying, oh, with the trust that we have in the relationships here, we started really dreaming. And we ended up launching Proclaim first, which is the part of the Tilma ecosystem that, takes missionary disciples and helps them become missionary. And then we launched Behold this last Pentecost in the middle of a pandemic, in order to have that part of the Tilma ecosystem is helping Catholics. And here's the saddest fact that I've heard from the research done by others, is that 93% of the church is sacramentalized but not evangelized, in that they've encountered the sacraments, but they haven't actually had a personal, what Pope Benedict calls a personal encounter with Jesus. He says Christianity begins with a personal encounter with Jesus. And that broke my heart. And that we said, how do we do that? And I think the church has historically, rightfully so, thought, oh, intellectual formation is a really powerful way to do that. And I think as a church, we do that really well. But human formation at scale is something that we haven't done super, super well. And so Behold is the part of the ecosystem that launched on Pentecost that tries to help people with the human formation of the Christian life, the Catholic life. And so as we're kind of doing that in Vancouver here, we launch into a pandemic and go, hey, the next diocese can use this as well. And that's kind of how it happened. So we've had these really great experiences with tons of ministries over the last 9 years in all these different facets: marriage and pro-life and parenting and evangelization. And now we've packaged all of that up really recently and put it into something we call the Tilma platform. And we're bringing that from diocese to diocese to diocese. And so we're in conversation with a few dioceses on figuring out how to roll that out there.
Yeah, that's really amazing, and I think that you hit on one of the biggest keys, and the fact that you're out there solving that issue within the church is just going to help it grow exponentially, because we all know people sit in the pews and encounter the sacraments, but they do not have the conversion of heart. They don't have that relationship, as you said, the human formation to recognize. I mean, going back to the beginning of the interview, that God is their Father. You know what I mean? Like, and that you're going to walk with people throughout the course of their lives, because that's what God is there to do. God is there to walk with you, bring you into the meetings, bring you into the different spots in your life. So, what a beautiful mission that you have, and it's just a great way to approach ministry as a whole. Especially with dioceses or even independent ministries. I know that you work a little bit with those as well. So it's just a great way to be able to bring the gospel to the world. And so thank you for your unique and listening to the voice of the Holy Spirit, because clearly that's how this is happening in your ministry and in your business, right? So thank you for just being in tune and solving the problem outside the box, because I think oftentimes dioceses or parishes, they do the exact same thing over again. We have to get better at this, and then we don't, because we just keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And we have to raise money, we have to do this, we have to do that. I think the way you're approaching things is just groundbreaking and so cool. So thank you for listening to the voice of the Holy Spirit and doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and I thank you as well, because one of the very important key aspects of evangelization is to get personal, right? And not make it, as you said, that 92% or whatever that number was, where people have been introduced to the sacraments, but not really evangelized in anything other than just going through the motions of receiving those sacraments as a child or as a young person. So I think you're going from point A to point B, and to really bringing them into the church, welcoming and making people feel like they are part of something much bigger than themselves. Because isn't that what it's about?
Yeah. I mean, if you think of what is I'm going to sound like a marketer for a second, but hear my disciple heart. If you think of what is the best thing to sell in the whole universe, it is Jesus. Like there's just, and I don't think it's easy. Don't get me wrong. I think that we have an enemy. We have like a culture that that can be close to it. Jesus warns us. In this world you have trouble, but he's overcome the world. But I think it's so easy to forget, like what this thing is. This thing is what we all long for. I think of the title of Ralph Martin's book, like it's the fulfillment of all desire. And I think that the church in the modern age, especially in what we're going into a post-COVID, I think more online world, we need to figure out as a church collectively how to speak to desire when it comes to communicating. Because the more I encounter Jesus, the more free I feel and I become. And I experience life with more joy and everything that every person is longing after. I think G.K. Chesterton said, every man who walks into a brothel is in search of God. And I feel like we have that dynamic is all over the world, at least the ones that I'm living in. There's all this searching for something, and we get the opportunity to say, hey, that thing is this. And I understand there's reasons why that's not trusted right now, and that there's complexities to that. But what we find, at least my big vision is there are people who understand this in the ministry space, like in the diocesan ministry space. There's these innovators, and I want to help them disrupt the current ministry model that exists so that we grow from 93% or whatever it is of people who are sacramentalized and not evangelized to way higher. And we know the church is not going to be herself if it's 100%, because then it's closed off and it's just us and the world. But I think that's a key part to this whole thing is how do we help people disrupt the model so that we can be truly free to share the gospel.
Yeah, and you brought up something there where you just, what happens if you grow that a little bit, take it down from 93 to 90 or 90, and it just reminded me of what Matthew Kelly said in the 4 Signs of a Dynamic Catholic, right? Like he said exactly what you just said, and it's what if I was able to take it from 7 to 8%? What if I was able to take that? What if I was able to just turn it a little bit? It would actually blow open the world. It would just change the world. And you're right. The best thing to sell is Jesus.
Yes, I agree.
The best thing to sell is Jesus. It's one of the hardest things to do. But there's no greater product. And you hate to call Jesus a product because he's not a product. He's a person. But there's nothing greater to talk about than your Savior. There's nothing greater to talk about, than, man, this is what Jesus did for me. I mean, think about it in the gospel, right? He's got beggars, he's got blind men, he's got lepers, and once they encounter him, and they just are the best salespersons for him, right? I mean, even the one guy that said, he said to him, please don't go and tell anybody else. What did he do? He went out and told everybody. So, I mean, he clearly, it's the best thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Amen. Amen. So for the people listening, and maybe there are some pastors, dioceses, we do have a lot of people who listen to this podcast that are really into church ministry. And they're thinking, I love what I'm hearing. What would be the next steps, and what are the steps that they would follow with you to get involved and to sign up?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I'd want them to consider is, if you think about discipleship, and you mentioned that Matthew Kelly, the 4 Signs of a Dynamic Catholic, I think that's what you referenced. What we've discovered is that, and we didn't start here, but we got here, is that discipleship is the business plan of the church. Because for every 1% that increases in if you go from 7 to 8%, how the math works out, that's 12% more in giving and 12% more in ministry activity. So for every 1% we grow 12% in money and time spent, sharing, ministering in the church. And so if you're a pastor listening, I think we all like orienting everything. All the signs that we see is if we double down on discipleship, we end up with a healthier, happier, more stable, all those good kind of things church. And so if that is an idea that grabs you and that's where you want to be, I invite you to go to tilmaplatform.com. We have entry points. If you're just a pastor at a parish, the parish product is available to you by yourself. You don't have to lock that through your diocese at all or things like that. We're happy to serve individual parishes all over the country. And if you're in diocese and you're either in evangelization and you're like, hey, that proclaim and behold that you mentioned earlier, those sound really appealing. You can also go to tilmaplatform.com and check that out, and we'd be happy to walk you through the platform, show you what it is. And from the parish perspective, if you are a pastor, just to go back to that, we're doing a pay what you can model up until the end of the year. So if you sign up on our wait list, and that can be, if you really can't afford it, we're happy to do that for $0. Because that's really where our heart's at in this ministry. And we know that, discipleship is the business plan, and it's going to, we're going to help you be able to afford it eventually. So we want to align our business goals with the church thriving.
I love how you're using your gifts to help the church and to evangelize. And it's just a beautiful thing. And you have a wonderful team of, I think you said 18 or 19 people that work with you.
Yeah, that's right. 19 people.
Amazing. And tell us also, I know you said that you're a father of 5, you're married. So how does your family love what you're doing? I'm sure they do.
Yeah. So my kids are still fairly young. My oldest is 9, so we got 9, 7, 5, 4, and 2. And so our house is just crazy, but they, the degree of which they understand what we're doing is, hey, we're sharing Jesus with the world. So my wife has a hard enough time explaining what we do. So when she gets asked, oh, what does your husband do? She's like, you got to just write something down so I can tell people. And I was like, okay, just go, send them to the website. But obviously you can't do that in every conversation. But our kids love the idea that we're sharing Jesus with the world. And that's about what they can understand at this point. But it makes for a really great conversation.
Yes. Yeah, I just wondered, this just kind of popped into my head. So as an end user, now that's more of a business term, right? We're talking evangelization. I'm a parishioner at a church within a diocese, and my diocese is using your platform. So tell me some of the things that I can expect to see and experience. I think that would be a great place for us. I'm just wondering for my own self. I mean, I'm in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. I love what I'm hearing. I mean, I hope they do it. So tell me, what, as an end user on my end, what would I see to feel more connected to my diocese, the church, and also just the whole universal Catholic Church?
Yeah. So as a parishioner in a diocese, like our connection really, what we find through our research, and sort of most people sitting in the pew don't really understand what diocese means. I think they understand it's like the managerial structure or some sort of formalized version of the church. That's kind of where the bishop is. But really our relationship with the church universal is we kind of think pope, and then we know we kind of have a bishop, and then we have a pastor. And the pastor or our priest or our parish community is really where we have a connection with the church. So as an end user, the platform allows you to to go on your website and find your sacraments, like how, when's confession, when's mass, like in a perfect world with no pandemic, that's super easy. but then the other part that we are doing that's a little bit different is we've connected a content library to Tilma that goes to the parish, but it's also at the diocesan level. So we're forming content partnerships with all sorts of people, and if a diocese has licenses with, bigger content producers, we're curating these pieces of content that really speak to helping people start those faith journeys. So, um, like I mentioned, the Abiding Together podcast, like we've got them on the platform, uh, and if you have an account on Tilma, so if you registered at your parish, you can orchestrate your giving. So you can do all your giving online. You can change your, by just logging um, into the system. You can do that, but we're sending you personalized uh, content that's based on you. So if you're, say, a 35-year-old mom, uh, we're not going to send you the Catholic cemeteries in your area information because it's not relevant to you. And so, but we will send you the content and the events and everything that's diocesan wide that's relevant to your age and stage and all those kinds of things. So we're trying to make it so that you're just getting the relevant information that the church wants to share so that we're not just adding more to the noise. And yeah, so yeah, that's in a nutshell. There's that, and then so many more things that you can expect from the platform.
Yeah, and just be able to. I mean, think about if there's just the regular average Joe Catholic out there listening to this right now. I mean, think about the things you can connect into, on this platform. So even if you're regular Joe Catholic out there, just maybe one of that 92% that's tuned in tonight. And you're like, man, this could spark my faith. Go talk to your pastor, right? Go talk to your pastor. I mean, if you have access to the bishop, you probably don't, but go talk to your pastor and see, how they can implement this in your parish, right? Wouldn't you just kind of say that, Jason, or no?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I feel like if you're at a parish, when I had my conversion experience, I had no idea where to go and find content and if it was trusted or all those kinds of things. But when I went to my pastor, who's now, I mentioned he's a bishop now, he was able to lead me and guide me in a way, but that was one-to-one. And I was lucky enough, and I sort of have a personality where I'm free enough to go and talk to my pastor and kind of wrestle my faith out with him. But I'm I'm a pretty big extrovert, and I have a lot of friends who are introverted, and that sounds like a really scary thing to do. But if you want curated content that your pastor can say, hey, this is what I want to share with my people, here's where you start, that's a way for them to advocate and say, hey, I want you to, dear pastor, to be able to approve content so that you can recommend content for me and I can see where your heart's at and what you're doing, so I can follow that. So for sure, advocate for the system, because it's more than just able to manage your giving and things like that. It's actually that we want to send you on a journey of faith so that you can have a deeper encounter with God. And so I think many, many people I've talked to are longing for that. And if we can help them, or if you want your pastor to help you with that, that's a beautiful thing.
I love how you are touching people's lives. You are running a business and you're doing a great job. And you have to put dinner on the table and a roof over your own head and for everybody that works for you. But you know that the end goal for your company, for what you're doing, is that you care so deeply about the people of the church and evangelizing them and bringing them back into the Catholic Church. So I just want to commend you on that. And I'm on your website right now. I just want to invite people to go to glasscanvas.io online and check it out. And it says right on your website on the front page that you use the power of a holistic ministry system to disciple, inspire, and send out your parishioners to evangelize their homes and communities through Tilma's set of digital tools, rich content, and ongoing services. You can better meet the needs of your parishioners in a digital age and begin the journey of transforming your diocese. I mean, I like that word, transforming. because that's what the church needs. Really, it's what the church needs worldwide, because after this pandemic, it's been tough. So I'm just grateful for ministries like yours. And I told you before at the beginning that I actually am the director for a nonprofit. Bill's also a nonprofit too. So tell us, what do you do for people like us? Because we also get a lot of nonprofits that listen in on these podcasts.
Yeah, and we have a podcast ourselves that we did a series. We're not in the podcasting business as much as you guys are, but we felt like, hey, we've got this what we call a ministry foundation. So how do we create something that's going to resonate with the world? And our process is very spirit-led in saying, what has God animated in you? What has the Holy Spirit animated in you? And we come at it with marketing terms, but it actually feels more like a spiritual exercise in that, why do you exist? What has the Father ordained for your ministry or your nonprofit to exist? What part of God are you animating in that space? And when you can name that, it's so powerful to understand which lane is yours, what you're called and anointed to do. And so we got a podcast series, which would, just bless anyone who wants to listen to it. It's called Speak the Unspoken. You can find it wherever podcasts are available. And Speak the Unspoken by Glass Canvas. And so that just runs through the principles of what your brand promise should be. And really that's, if you guys are like, marketing is a bad word, I want to just, hold some room for, we really come from a spiritual perspective on these things. And we've taken these tools that have been developed in sort of the marketing world, and we try to apply them in a faith context. And it's different excuse me, where you'd read that anywhere else. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, Tilma has so much room to build in content or ministry right into the platform, because we know that, these apostolates are filling gaps where a diocese can't or shouldn't reach into. So our job is to figure out where those things fit, and we'd love to be able to connect with through content. So one of our core values at Glass Canvas is, I've said it already twice on the podcast, is being called and anointed. We believe God kind of calls people and anoints them, like he's got this special part of himself that he wants to give to the world through you. And we'd love to figure out if and how that fits within Tilma. So if you're in a ministry that's producing content, we'd love to talk. We'd love to figure out how to get that content into the right spots. And we also we help ministries figure out their brand. And we do that from a spiritual perspective, in figuring out very clear and aligned way about how to communicate who you are.
It's very important. I mean, in my work that I do, I work for the St. Raymond Nonatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. And I've learned so much about what you just said. What you communicate is just so important to your mission and to how people read what your mission is. And that's more important, is how are they seeing you, right? And what is their interpretation of your ministry and what you can do to help them and the people they know.
Yeah.
So,
and your story matters. What God has done in your organization. You guys have been prompting me the whole time to kind of just share. I think that, spirit-filled organizations, they have a salvation history of their own that's really powerful, that if we can see what God has done in the past and where he's really, where the Spirit has come to life in an organization, then we can go, okay, how do we stay true to that? And it helps in all sorts of decisions that a ministry might have to make, because we're, the more disciplined we can be in the things that we say no to, create the yeses that really lead to life-giving opportunities for our own lives, but also for the organizations and the people we serve.
Oh, I agree with that. You cannot say yes to everything that comes down. We only have so much time, and we have to also have time for our friends and family, right? And for our faith, really, to pray and be with the Lord and celebrate the sacraments. So
absolutely.
Very, very important. So we have about 5 more minutes left of the podcast. It's been so much fun so far. We have to have you back.
Yeah,
Would
I'd
you
love
have
to come
any?
back.
Yeah. Would you have any final words or anything else that you want to, a call to action or something to the people listening?
Yeah, so much of what we've talked about is available, on either our website at glasscanvas.io or tomaplatform.com. I think the thing I want to leave you with the most is it can be very easy to be discouraged in the church. I think of especially where the obligation of mass has been lifted, where people aren't, you're not obligated to go to mass anymore. We know that there are people who might not return. And I think what we have to ask ourselves is, what was COVID-18 in our parish or in our church? We know what COVID-19 was, but what was COVID-18? And do we want to return to that? And that's sort of a somber note. But I see, I have a real privilege of being able to work with ministries across the U.S. in discerning what God is doing in their midst. And I see a tremendous amount of hope for the church. I see dioceses are, they're coming alive. I feel like 10 years ago, people weren't asking the question of evangelization. And before COVID hit, I feel like so many of them were saying, hey, how do we evangelize more effectively? It has become almost a buzzword in our thing. And I think instead of being, I'm encouraged by that. We're all trying to figure out how the church can be more herself. And my call to action would be just to pray into that, to pray into this renewal that I think God is doing. And I want to share that from my perspective, I see the Holy Spirit is moving, and we're alive for such a time as this so that we can make a difference in the church and look back. We'll celebrate all in heaven together and have a good time.
Absolutely. Jason, this was so fantastic to have you on today. Thank you so much for sharing and just sharing showing so much wisdom and sharing your story. It's been so powerful. So thank you.
I agree. So powerful. And I'd love to have you back again. I know Bill does
absolutely.
too.
Yeah, I'd love to come back. It was a real joy. Thank you for holding my story and letting me share a lot and jumping right in there with me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Folks, I want to remind you as we're closing up tonight's podcast that there are a few hours left on our free download of our contemplative stations, the Contemplative Las Posadas download. It's available for free on Amazon until 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. So please head over to Amazon, and if you got a Kindle, or even if you don't have a Kindle, you can read it on the computer for free. And it's also part of our Advent pilgrimage, which is ongoing. And if you haven't signed up yet for that, that's also free. It's available on parausiamedia.com. Check the links below. We'll put the links in the podcast notes, along with all of Jason's websites and stuff like that, in case you don't have that razor sharp memory to remember all the websites and everything. They'll be in the show notes. But folks, I want to thank you, and as always, thank you, Ann, for being here tonight. And it's exciting to be back from Thanksgiving and in Advent.
Oh, thank you, Bill. And thank you so much, Jason. It was so nice to meet you.
You guys too.
All right, folks. Well, thanks for tuning in and being here with us tonight. As always, visit our websites, patchworkheart.org and andysantis.com. But thank you for being with us. And as we always say, keep beating to your Catholic heart and sowing hope into broken hearts. We'll see you next Tuesday. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sowing Hope on Patchwork Heart Radio. For more information about this podcast and our ministries, visit our websites, patchworkheart.org and andysantis.com. You can also follow and interact with us on Twitter at PWH Ministry or Andy Santis 2.